Welcome to Things You Don't Know. This is something you should know, truly, and it's something that I am very passionate about. What am I talking about? Voting. That's what I'm talking about. Voting may be the most familiar act in American Republican democracy, but familiarity can make us underestimate it. Every election, millions of Americans vote. That's true. And millions of others who could vote do not. So today, we're looking at a simple question. Why does voting matter? After all, it's just one vote.
And let's be clear, we're not going to tell anyone who to vote for. That's an individual decision. The more important point is that representative government depends upon people actually participating in the process.
Here,
Because
here.
when people don't participate, elections, they don't just simply stop. Decisions still get made. The only difference is the non voter has chosen not to take part in making them.
People sometimes say, well, my vote doesn't matter. One vote isn't going to decide a presidential election. Well, usually one vote won't. Sometimes it actually will. But that's not really how elections work. Elections are the accumulated decisions of millions of individual people.
Exactly, Dr. Weaver. Saying one vote doesn't matter because it's only one vote is a little like saying $1 doesn't matter in $1 million bank account. The total only exists because the individual units are there, and presidential elections aren't the only elections that matter.
That's exactly right. Governors, senators, members of Congress, mayors, school boards, judges in many states, sheriffs, city councils, tax proposals, bond issues, and ballot questions. These can all be decided by voters. Some of those decisions, well, they may affect your daily life more directly than anything happening in Washington.
Yeah, a representative democracy works on a very basic bargain. Citizens allow elected officials to make decisions on their behalf. But citizens periodically decide whether those officials should remain in power.
And Dr. Weaver, that peaceful transition of political authority is important. Instead of settling political disagreements by force, elections provide a regular procedure for deciding who governs.
And an election doesn't require everyone to agree with the result. It requires people to accept a legitimate process in which they have an opportunity to participate. And I should say, it's their civic duty to participate.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Let's put American participation into perspective. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 65.3% of the citizens voting age population reported voting in the 2024 presidential election. That's about 154 million people. That also means roughly one third did not report voting.
Now, two-thirds, that looks fairly good until you compare the United States with some other democracies. Now, I have to say, we like to present ourselves as a democratic republic, when in all reality, we seem to be moving away from that towards being an oligarchy.
Many other nations have larger levels of participation. Germany's 2025 federal election, for example, had an 82.5% turnout. Australia's 2025 federal election had 90.7% turnout among enrolled voters, or 89% of the eligible population.
But America isn't automatically at the bottom. Britain's 2024 general election had a turnout of only 59.7%. So, the broader point isn't that Americans never vote. It's that participation varies enormously among democracies. And the United States leaves a substantial portion of its eligible population on the sidelines.
There's an important qualification we have to state when we make these comparisons. Some countries have compulsory voting. Australia is possibly the best known example. Voting in Australian federal elections has been compulsory since 1924, and failing to participate without a valid reason such as illness, distance from the polls, or religious objection can result in a fine. Turnout jumped to more than 91% at the first federal election after compulsory voting was introduced.
Australia isn't alone in this. Countries with compulsory voting laws include Argentina, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Luxembourg, Peru, Singapore, Thailand, Turkey, and Uruguay, among others. But enforcement differs considerably from country to country.
And that's an important distinction. In some places, the law is actively enforced. In others, compulsory voting exists largely on paper and carries little practical penalty. International IDEA describes compulsory voting more as a spectrum than a simple yes or no category.
The United States takes a different approach. Voting is a right, but exercising that right is voluntary. And there's a legitimate debate here, ladies and gentlemen. Supporters of compulsory voting argue that democracy is more representative when nearly every adult person participates. Critics argue that the freedom to vote should also include the freedom not to vote.
Either way, Australia's numbers show that the rules surrounding elections can have major effect on participation.
Turnout isn't just about the total number. It also matters whether the people who vote resemble the population as a whole. Suppose one age group votes heavily while another rarely votes. Candidates have a practical reason to pay more attention to the group that consistently shows up.
That's not necessarily sinister. Politicians, like any other person, respond to incentives. A group that reliably votes demonstrates political influence.
Which is why younger people that complain that the government ignores their concerns, well, they should really pay attention to turnout. Political influence isn't based on only how strong people hold an opinion. It also depends on whether they participate when elections occur.
Yes, another problem is that Americans treat voting as something that happens, every 4 years.
But government operates at several levels, my friends. Local elections may determine property taxes, school policy, policing, zoning, roads, public transportation, and other services people encounter every day.
And even though they shouldn't, those elections frequently attract far less attention than presidential races. So someone who says, "Oh, politics doesn't affect me," well, they really might want to look at a local ballot. Quite a few things affecting that person's neighborhood might just be on it.
Another reason people give for staying home is, I don't like any of the choices. Well, that's understandable. Elections don't always present voters with an ideal candidate.
But voting has rarely required enthusiasm. A voter can support the candidate he or she considers better qualified, more trustworthy, closer to their view on important issues, or simply preferable to the alternatives.
If voters don't feel informed enough to choose, they can leave races blank. Participating in an election doesn't require pretending to have an opinion about every office on the ballot.
Of course, simply increasing turnout isn't the entire goal. Democracy benefits most from informed participation. That means looking beyond advertisements, slogans, memes, and social media posts.
Read what candidates actually propose, look at their records, compare multiple reliable sources, and distinguish factual claims from political opinion.
Now, I have to say, I think this one is very personally important to me. Please don't assume that something is true just because it confirms what you already believe. And that applies to every political viewpoint. Voting takes a few minutes. Now, deciding responsibly how to vote, well, that may take considerably longer.
Yet people sometimes describe not voting as refusing to participate in the system. Ha ha ha. But the system continues whether you participate or not.
And the reality is, someone will still win, laws will still be passed, budgets will still be approved, taxes will still be collected, courts and agencies will still operate.
Yeah, the show, it really goes on without you folks. So, abstaining, it doesn't remove you from the consequences of an election. It simply just means that other voters make the choice without your participation.
Yes, it's also easy to forget that the American electorate was once far more restricted than it is today. For much of U.S. history, large groups of people were excluded from meaningful participation through law, discrimination, or both.
The expansion of voting rights, first to white men without property, to African Americans, to women, to Native Americans, to younger adults and others, was a long, painful historical process.
Which, Dr. Dineen, it really makes an interesting contrast here. Generations of Americans fought to gain access to the ballot. Today, one of democracy's problems is persuading people who already possess that right to use it. So we need to get out there and use it.
Yep, voting doesn't guarantee that your candidate wins.
It doesn't guarantee that government makes good decisions.
And it doesn't require us to agree with one another.
What it does provide is a peaceful mechanism for citizens to choose representatives, reject representatives, influence public policy, and determine who exercises governmental power.
Other free societies approach participation differently. Some require citizens to vote, others, including the United States, leave the decision to the individual.
But voluntary participation creates its own responsibility. If citizens want representative government to reflect them, then they have to participate in choosing the representatives.
You don't have to vote the way your neighbor votes.
You certainly don't have to vote the way your family votes.
And you don't have to vote the way we vote.
Learn the issues, examine the candidates, make your own decision. And when election day comes, remember that democracy isn't only something government does, it is something citizens do.
We hope you've enjoyed this, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very important topic. Please leave us a like and a comment and a subscription. Come back soon. A lot more interesting stuff going on here.
Yes, and please get out there and vote. You may not think it does, but your vote matters. Come back soon, folks. Bye for now.